Discover 7 spine-chilling stories. Whispers of rain. Unveil unexplained terror. Dare to listen. The rain drummed relentlessly against the roof of Sarah's modest home in Maplewood, creating a haunting melody that felt just a little too eerie for comfort. The cozy evening promised a break from her endless juggling act: 2 jobs, raising a teenage son, Jake, and a dangerously curious daughter, Mia. But as the winds began to howl and thunder cracked like a whip, a chill snaked down Sarah's spine. Mia, with her wide innocent eyes, whispered about the silly ghosts she sensed fluttering just outside their windows, a mix of fear and fascination that set Sarah on edge. It was then that Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming voicemail. She frowned and checked the number. A familiar dread engulfed her as she recognized it. It was Becky, the neighbor who had vanished months ago without a trace. The shaky voice on the recording sent a flood of chills through her. "Sarah, you have to listen. There's darkness lurking in Maplewood. It's not safe." The hairs on her arms prickled as unsettling memories tugged at her. Jake's friend, once vibrant, now jumped at shadows. She had dismissed it all, the uneasy whispers and jittery glances, but the storm outside mirrored her rising anxiety. Shadows danced along her kitchen walls, and she could swear the rain whispered secrets just out of reach. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The storm showed no sign of mercy, growing more ominous, suffocating the air with a palpable tension. Sarah held Mia close, hoping her presence would chase away the growing dread. But the gathering storm murmured something sinister. Each clap of thunder seemed a warning. The winds chanted secrets of long-forgotten tragedies in Maplewood. And then came the whispers, raspy, urgent words creeping into Sarah's mind, urging her to uncover the truth. Her thoughts returned to the abandoned school on the outskirts of town, rumored to be the site of untold horrors. Death swept under the rug by those she trusted, the authorities. Paranoia tightened its grip, twisting her stomach into knots. Neighbors who once felt like family now felt suspicious. The laughter that had once echoed through the streets rang hollow. Jake had become ensnared in this web of fear, too haunted by his friend's troubled eyes. Panic flared until she could hardly breathe. With dread fueling her heart, she stepped outside into the storm, the rain pouring like a deluge over her. The familiar streets transformed into something sinister, dripping with menace. She shivered as the whispers intensified, growing almost valid, a call to peel back the layers of her serene suburban life. Shadows shifted, creating shapes that stalked her from the corners of her vision. Then, suddenly, a figure stepped into the flickering light, obscured by rain and night, glinting eyes locking onto hers with malice. Her breath caught as realization dawned. This was no neighbor, it was the embodiment of her nightmares, the dark truth of Maplewood that had taken form. As the storm raged, Sarah's grip tightened, heart pounding wildly. The whispers grew louder, and the darkness beckoned. What if the true monsters were the people she thought she could trust? The figure loomed closer, its eyes cutting through the torrential rain like twin fires. Fear twisted into a solid knot in Sarah's throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body felt glued to the spot. Each raindrop felt like a dagger against her skin as she stood frozen, paralyzed by an unseen terror. "Get inside, Mom." Jake's voice pierced through the suffocating rage of the storm, snapping her back into reality. He appeared behind her, his face a mask of panic, his body trembling against the wind. In that moment, the figure hesitated, as if calculating its next move, and Sarah seized the opportunity to haul Mia against her body, tugging Jake back toward the front door. She slammed it shut once they were inside, a rush of adrenaline surging through her veins as she locked the door. The house felt small and suffocating now, a fragile shelter against the storm's ferocity. The rain lashed against the windows, the wind howled like a wounded animal, but they were safe for now. What was that? Jake gasped, his young face pale, eyes wide and darting toward the stained glass window. I don't know," Sarah stammered, feigning confidence she didn't feel. The whispers from outside coiled around her, taunting, reminding her of the voicemail. The weight of Becky's warning settled like a heavy fog in her mind. Something dark was indeed lurking in Maplewood, and it was closer than they thought. Mia, unscathed and perplexed, asked, "Mom, can we look? What if it's a friendly ghost?" Her innocent curiosity cut through the tension, but it only deepened Sarah's dread. "Stay away from the windows," Jake hissed, his voice shaking. "Don't you see? It's not safe." Panicking, Sarah grabbed her phone, staring at the screen but not processing. What would she even do? Call for help? Wait for someone to rescue them? Would anyone even answer? Could anyone even vanquish this growing shadow? "Mom!" Jake's voice interrupted her frantic thoughts. "What's that noise?" Tension prickled along her skin as the ominous sound emerged, a low, guttural rumble that came not from the storm. It was coming from the basement. A soft thud followed, then a scrape and then a sound like nails scratching against wood. The walls felt alive, pulsating with dread. "What is it?" Mia's eyes darted between them, confusion morphing into fear. I don't know," Sarah replied, her heart racing. "I don't think we should go down there," but Jake's curiosity had already ignited. "We have to see. What if it's something terrible? What if it's linked to No?" Panic surged within her. "We don't want to find out. We need to stay safe." The thuds grew louder, echoing up the stairs, mingling with the storm's fury. A wild energy filled the air, moving like shadows through the corners of their home. The wrongness pressed against her, squeezing her heart until she could hardly think. "Mom, what if it's Becky?" Jake shouted, desperation breaking his voice. "What if she needs help?" At that moment, the power flickered and died, plunging them into darkness, the only light a flash of lightning that illuminated the hallway for just a second. Then, silence. An eerie, suffocating silence. Sarah's breath hitched. "Stay close," she whispered, pushing her children behind her as she moved toward the basement door. The handle felt icy against her palm as she opened it, the creeping dread curling around her like smoke. The darkness beckoned. It promised something terrible, and yet, something irresistible lurked beneath that fear. What awaited them in the murky depths? As she stepped into the basement, the air grew heavy and oppressive, filled with an energy that felt almost alive. How long could she protect her children from what lay ahead? And what if the source of all their terror was closer than they dared to imagine? Just then, a chilling whisper drifted up from under the floorboards, an invitation, a challenge: "Come and see." The basement door creaked, the sound grating against Sarah's nerves as she stepped inside. Inky blackness swallowed the stairs, and she felt the weight of something ancient and sinister there with her. Her heart thundered in her chest as she squinted into the void, searching for a shape, a movement, anything that could hint at what lurked just beyond her sight. "Mom, I can't see," Mia whimpered, clutching Jake's arm. "Shoo." Sarah hushed, trying to steady her breathing. The whispering mercilessly taunted her, swirling like a ghostly breeze. "Stay close," she urged again, stepping further in. The air thickened, chilling her skin as though she crossed into a different world. Jake's voice was strained. "We shouldn't be here." A shudder ran through the floor beneath them as the whisper came again, insistent and urgent. "Come and see." It was closer now, like a breath against the back of her neck, sending ice racing through her veins. "Don't!" she barked, suddenly spinning to face her children. "We can't trust it." But already, Jake had stepped ahead, drawn by an invisible line, as if something in that dark space was calling him, promising safety or perhaps something worse. "Jake, stop!" Sarah lunged forward, grasping his wrist, but he shook her off, eyes glazing with something she couldn't comprehend. "Mom, it's okay. It just wants to show us." His voice was soft, almost mesmerized. "No. We need to leave. She felt her own panic rising, amplified by the forgotten stories of others who went missing in Maplewood. They had all been warned, hadn't they? Darkness claimed them, and now it felt like it was reaching for them too. Mia's hands tightened around her mother's leg, her small body trembling. "I'm scared." With the power out, they were cocooned in silence, but the darkness pulsed, throbbing with life, as if something in the shadows breathed, chillingly aware of their presence. "Come and see," it beckoned again, more insistent. Every instinct screamed at Sarah to fight against the pull, to resist the allure of the unknown, yet her feet seemed glued to the spot. She fought against it, but her eyes kept darting to the depths of the basement, where something stirred in the gloom. What if it was just the storm? What if it was Becky, or something pretending to be innocent? A flash of fury forced her to act. "I said no," she yelled, grabbing Jake's arm tighter, pulling him back with one swift motion. Just as she turned to retreat, a loud crash resounded from the far corner of the basement. Something heavy had fallen, disturbing the quiet with a resonant thump, followed by the unmistakable sound of scraping. The children gasped, and anxiety shot through Sarah's body. "What was that?" she whispered, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. "Mom, please." Jake's voice trembled. "We can't just leave." But something primal surged through her, a mother's instinct. They had to get out. This place, this darkness, was a trap, and they were the prey. "Follow me," she commanded, shoving her way back toward the stairs as the violence of the storm echoed in protest outside. She felt a hand tugging at her sleeve, cold and clammy, too small and wrong to be Mia's. Flashlight beams danced through the basement door, slicing through the suffocating darkness. "Mom!" Mia screamed, terror rippling in her voice. "It's behind us." Freezing, Sarah turned slowly, dread pooling in her stomach. The shadows thickened, coalescing into a figure, a silhouette against the wall that shouldn't be there. Its eyes burned with an unholy hunger, darker than the storm outside, and the air crackled with something unsettling. What was lurking just behind her? And could she pull her children to safety in time? The figure stepped forward, and Sarah felt that familiar whisper claw at her mind once more. Come and see what lay hidden in the depths of the darkness. What price would they pay to satisfy the calls of the unknown? The figure emerged from the shadows, a twisted parody of humanity. It glided forward, unhurried, as if savoring her horror. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tightly over protruding bones. What had once been a face now wore a grotesque smile, stretching unnaturally wide, exposing rows of jagged teeth that were slick with something dark. "Mom!" Jake cried, his voice fracturing under the weight of fear. "I see it." "Run!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline igniting her legs. She yanked Mia closer and darted toward the stairs. The darkness constricted around her, the whispers escalating into a wailing, clawing presence that clawed at her sanity. The basement echoed with the chaos, each footfall resonating in a warped rhythm that felt like an impending death knell, but Jake lingered, frozen in place, caught in the magnetic hold of the figure. His blue eyes, usually filled with determination, were now glassy, reflecting only a void. "Mom, wait!" he pleaded, his voice an eerily calm contrast to the frenzy surrounding them. "No!" Sarah screamed, spinning back just in time to see the figure stretch an arm toward Jake, fingers unnaturally long, curling like vines seeking to ensnare. The air thickened with an unnatural chill, and Sarah felt it deep within her marrow, urging her to flee or stay still, as if the basement itself were breathing. "Jake!" She reached out, desperation fueling her. She forced one foot to move, then the other. Every instinct screamed to save her child. "Come, and see." The voice slithered through the shadows like smoke, caressing the edges of her mind. Another crash resonated, reverberating off the walls, snapping Jake back to reality. Instinct took hold. He stumbled back, breaking the trance as Sarah lunged forward, grasping his arm with a grip that felt as fierce as iron. "We have to go. Now." They sprinted for the stairs, the whispers now howling, clawing at their backs, a cacophony of desperate pleas dressed in ancient malice. The beam from the flashlight stabbed into the darkness, but it only deepened the shadows, revealing glimpses of things lurking just beyond the reach of light, eyes that glimmered, sharp teeth, and the tangle of fingers joining their dreadful dance. Mia's cries echoed in Sarah's ears, piercing through the chaos. "I'm scared. I'm scared. Hold on to me," Sarah shouted, pulling her daughter tight against her. They rushed up the stairs, but even with each step forward, she could feel the spectral chill questing at their heels, grasping, like the long-forgotten souls of Maplewood, demanding their due. As they burst through the door, the light from the hallway hit them like an embrace. They tumbled into the familiar warmth, but the sensation was fleeting. The whispers trickled just outside, thrumming incessantly, vibrating through the walls. Sarah slammed the door shut, the finality alone doing little to soothe her. "Did we get away?" Mia asked, her voice small and trembling. I don't know," Sarah admitted, her heart racing. The feeling of eyes watching them from behind the door, of the darkness pressing against the wood, made her skin crawl. Mom, Jake's voice trembled, its shake laced with something heavier. "What if it comes back?" The unease pooled in Sarah's stomach, twisting like a serpent. She squeezed her son's hand, resisting the urge to look back at the basement door, but the energy behind it pulsed, taunting her with its silence. Not everything that lived in the shadows had been foiled by mere light. Before she could answer, the lights flickered, the familiar hum in the house sputtering, dying, leaving them in oppressive dark once more. A single shadow paused beneath the door that led back into the abyss, stretching ever so slightly, and she could almost hear it whispering again, "Come and see what life-changing secrets lay within the darkness." What would it take to truly escape its grasp? The sound of shuffling echoed in the darkness, a slow, calculated rhythm that made Sarah's heart race even faster. The flickering overhead bulbs extinguished completely, plunging them into a void. Panic clawed at her throat, and she gripped Mia tighter, feeling her daughter's small frame shivering against her legs. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, as if the words could keep the darkness at bay. The room felt monstrous now, its familiar corners turned sinister. She strained her ears, desperate to grasp the sounds. Every creak, every rustle of fabric hinted at the unseen horrors lurking around them. "Mom, I can't see," Mia whimpered, her voice trembling. Just hold my hand." "We'll make it through," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She tried to carry their fear into strength, but thick, suffocating shadows wrapped around them tighter, squeezing the courage from her heart. A chilling breeze swept through the hallway, and with it came that whispering voice again, sweet and sinister. "Come, and see." Sarah's blood ran cold. She could almost feel the figure from the basement, its grotesque smile etched in her mind. It was as if it were waiting on the other side of the door, just beyond their small sanctuary, using the dark to lure them back into its grasp. "Should we try to get out of the house?" Jake's voice was thin, a thread barely holding him together. "No, we can't open the door. We'll stay right here," she insisted, despite the doubt creeping into her veins. She backed away from the door, keeping it in her sight. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on with a deafening pop. Sarah squinted against the sudden brilliance, her instincts screaming that something had changed. But nothing was there. "See? We're okay," she offered, forcing a smile even as her heart raced. Yet as the brightness seeped into the corners of the room, the sense of safety remained tenuous. The shadows shifted, swirling like smoke, leaving traces of despair lingering in the air. But there was no moment of calm. Another crash echoed from the basement, violent and shattering, as if something had broken free. All three of them froze, the collective gasp a haunting melody of fear. "Mom, I'm scared," Mia mouthed silently, her eyes wide, reflecting the lights. Just then, a low scraping sound began against the basement door, rhythmic like a heartbeat, stirring the air with a coldness that rushed into the room, frost creeping into their bones. "What is happening?" Jake whispered, a mixture of dread and curiosity weaving through his voice. As the creature shifted just outside, shadows bled through every crack, and the whispers turned into a chant. Join us, get back!" Sarah shouted, her protective instinct flaring. She pressed herself against the wall, holding Mia and Jake close, battling the urge to retreat into the other room. But the door quaked, rattled as if something, a presence, was clawing its way back through. The intensity grew, filling her with dread. How could they fight something they couldn't even see? Then, without warning, the door burst open. Darkness poured in like liquid night, and Sarah felt a force pushing against her, a sickening wave that threatened to engulf them. "Run!" She screamed as the entire house felt alive, vibrating with malice. In the turmoil, she felt Jake's hand slip away, and her breath caught in her throat. "Jake!" She cried out, panic sharpening her senses. Where was he? Her eyes darted around, and amid the swirling shadows, she caught a glimpse of him being pulled back toward the void, the smile of the figure now visible within the darkness, inescapable, sinister. Before she could move, the whisper turned to a shriek. "Come and see!" The world began to spin, and with it came the horrifying thought that maybe they would never escape this place. Trapped in the growing chaos, Sarah's breath caught as she faced the choice of diving into the darkness or forging back into the unknown with limited hope. What would they find if they ventured deeper? Could they even survive what lay beyond? Sarah's heart pounded mercilessly as she tore her gaze from the swirling shadows. "Mia!" she yelled, ready to break free from the macabre grip of that threshold. But every inch of her body felt anchored to the floor, as if the house itself conspired to keep her there. Amid the chaos, she caught sight of her daughter, trembling and wide-eyed, held tightly by a grasp she could not see. "Stay close!" Sarah roared, her fight-or-flight instincts clawing for dominance. She lunged backward just as Jake's terrified face was swallowed by the maw of darkness. "Jake! We have to save him!" Panic surged through her. It felt like climbing a mountain made of flesh. She couldn't abandon him. Not now. "Mommy, don't leave me!" Mia cried, her small fingers clutching Sarah as the shadows clawed at them both. The house trembled around them, and Sarah felt it in her bones. The very walls seemed to breathe, gorging on their fear. She needed to think. She needed a plan. Suddenly, that sickly sweet whisper echoed louder, morphing into a tangible force, pulling them toward the basement door, which now stood ajar, a gaping black void. "Join us down here!" Sarah fought back, bile rising in her throat. "No!" she shouted defiantly, wrapping her arms around Mia, keeping the little girl shielded from the abyss. "We want to go down there. We have to find Jake and get out." In that moment, a sound rumbled like thunder. The floor beneath them quaked, and an icy wind howled through the hall. Shadows flickered and danced as if alive, mocking her resolve. "Mommy?" Mia's voice trembled, a question more like a prayer. "Just stay behind me." Sarah's voice cracked but held firm. Together, they edged toward the basement door, her instincts screaming at her to run the other way. "He wouldn't just vanish," she whispered, more to herself. "He wouldn't." Yet, somewhere deep down, dread coiled tightly. The house seemed to twist, warping reality, making everything nonsensical. The shadows began to pulse, twisting into grotesque shapes and figures that blinked in and out of her line of sight. "Help!" Jake's distant call echoed from the darkness beneath them, desperation woven through his voice. "Mia, listen to me," Sarah said, urgency flooding her tone. "We have to find a way to get him back. We can't let them take him." The resolve set within her, fighting the gnawing uncertainty wrapping around her heart. "Where do we go?" Mia whispered, tears glistening. With no time to waste, Sarah pulled her daughter close, taking a deep breath as she stepped towards the door. It loomed ahead, a chasm of blackness daring her to cross the threshold. "We go down. Together. We find Jake." But the moment they crossed into the new territory, shadows surged forward, wrapping around her like chains, cool and suffocating. She stumbled but stood firm, embracing the fear that threatened to consume her. A sudden realization dawned on her. What if the shadows were alive? What if the sinister force that haunted them had a purpose? Something's wrong, she breathed deeply. Whatever is down here, it wants us. No. Mia cried, digging her nails into Sarah's shirt, her voice rising in pitch. Hold on. Sarah shouted, adrenaline bursting within her as she pushed deeper into the dark, fighting against whatever lurked in the depths below, but as they advanced, the chanting grew louder, the shadows coalescing into a viscid mass that began to form around them, something monstrous yet mesmerizing. Sarah braced herself, the weight of dread mixing with an inexorable nightmare that loomed just ahead. Jake! Where are you? She cried, her words swallowed by the dark as she stepped further into the unknown. What would they find in the frigid depths? Was Jake still alive? Or was he now another whisper in the deafening dark? Sarah felt the shadows closing in, a sickening embrace that felt all too real. We have to go back, she gasped, pulling Mia closer. The air was thick and damp, each breath a bitter struggle against the suffocating darkness. Mommy, I'm scared, Mia whimpered. Each whispered syllable ignited the hollow where Sarah's hope once flickered. Shadows danced at the periphery, but there was no choice. They had to find Jake, or they were as good as lost. Just a little further, Sarah urged, gripping Mia's hand as they descended cautiously into the belly of the house. The stairs creaked beneath their weight, objects rattling ominously in the oppressive silence. The whispers intensified, swirling around them a lingering ghost of a long-forgotten sorrow. Join us, it murmured, voices morphing from sweet to sinister. The temperature dropped. Sarah shivered, the cold biting her skin like icy talons. Jake! She shouted again, the sound more desperate than before, echoing back to her as if mocking her plea. She strained to listen, heart hammering in her chest. But there was only the relentless chanting, punctured by the distant throbs of her pulse. Suddenly, Mia pulled at her hand. Mommy, look! Sarah followed her gaze. Sliding along the dim light from a crevice above, a blurred face appeared, contorted in terror. Jake. His mouth moved, but no sound emerged. There was only silence, a tangible void that stretched between them, obstructing connection. Jake! She screamed, reaching for him, but the shadows wrapped tighter around her, pulling her backward into the murk. The chant escalated, a dreadful crescendo that seemed to merge with her racing heartbeat. Mommy, don't! Mia cried, panic cutting across her voice like a blade. I can't lose you too. Sarah returned fiercely, fear transforming into determination. She watched her son fade from view, swallowed by the black that pulsed and throbbed like a living creature. No. We're coming. But each step toward him felt like wading through molasses. The walls seemed to constrict, breathing, alive with an intent that rippled through the air. Backwards they were pushed, deeper into the choking cold as tendrils of darkness slithered around them. Please. Let us go. Sarah screamed into the void. The shadows recoiled slightly, almost as if they had hesitated. The room shifted, refracting their existence moldy memories wrapped in pain. For every heartbeat, the pressure grew unbearable. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Mia pointed toward a staircase that spiraled off into deeper darkness, almost as if it were beckoning them. That way, Mommy. It's brighter. Trust, woven together with fear, led her forward. They turned, racing toward what flickered like a distant hope. Each breath echoed with dread, shadows screaming and shrieking against their escape. They reached the landing, where a faint light illuminated the next chamber. What they found nearly shattered Sarah's heart, an altar made of bones and whispers, candles flickering atop jagged stalagmites, shadows dancing across the walls like a macabre ballet. No! Sarah gasped, her entire body betraying her as she stumbled back. Mia, we have to go now. Panic transformed her voice into a sharp blade. Yet even as she turned, the shadows converged, cutting off their retreat. Join us forever, a multitude of voices enveloped them, clogging the air, wrapping around her mind like a noose. Sarah stood, eyes darting. The altar loomed before them, the light flickering ominously. There was something there, a twisted figure, its features obscured. Was this Jake, transformed into one of them? "Mommy!" Mia cried, pulling at her as shadows began to close the distance. Time stretched into an unbearable eternity. She had to choose now: fight or succumb to the abyss. "Believe in me!" she shouted, fury igniting within her chest. "We're not theirs." Just then, the shadows hesitated, quivering as if understanding her resolve. And at the altar, the figure shifted, eyes locking onto hers. One was unmistakably Jake's, clouded over in the dark. "Mom! Help!" His voice rang, a final plea that sent chills straight through her soul, but as she lunged forward, a thunderous clap shattered the tense stillness, knocking her off her feet. Sarah watched in horror as the shadows coalesced into a horrifying shape, the very embodiment of despair. Was this the end? Or worse, the beginning of an endless nightmare? "Mommy!" Mia's scream was swallowed by the chaos as darkness drew them closer to the altar where shadows awaited, and then, silence filled the air, thick and palpable. What would it do to them? Would they join Jake in that ominous dance? The darkness shifted, ready to claim them at last. Sarah lay on the ground, the breath knocked from her lungs as the darkness loomed around her like a storm cloud, a suffocating blanket filled with despair. Cold tendrils snaked around her arms and legs, pulling her toward the altar, toward Jake, toward whatever unspeakable fate awaited them in this pit of nightmares. "Mia!" she cried out, panic streaking through her like fire. She blinked against the shadows, focusing desperately on her daughter, who stood frozen, wide-eyed and trembling. The altar flickered with malevolent light, casting haunting shadows that twisted and turned, whispering promises of endless joined souls. "Mommy!" Mia whimpered again, but a chorus of voices drowned her out. "Join us forever," they sighed, coaxing and chilling all at once. The words burrowed into Sarah's mind, eroding her resolve. She pulled at Mia's hand, hoisting herself up. The shadows recoiled ever so slightly, but their grip grew harder, more insistent. "We can't let them take us, sweetheart. We have to fight." But as words escaped her lips, she felt the ground shift beneath her. It felt alive, pulsing beneath them like a heart in agony. "Please, just take us back," Sarah whispered, racked by the weight of despair. As if in answer, the ground rippled, and a vision crashed upon her memories she had tried so hard to bury. Flickers of laughter at a sunlit park. A bright summer day, spending time with Jake and Mia, their hair wind-tossed and dancing in the happy light. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness that surrounded her. Forget, a voice hissed, a poisonous whisper curling around the edges of her sanity. Fear gripped her, unyielding. She didn't want to forget. She couldn't. But the images twisted, mashing together into dark versions of those moments: a laughing family turning to ash. Sarah's breath hitched. "Mom!" Mia cried, her small hand pulling harder. "We have to go. The light is fading." A sudden jolt shattered Sarah's focus. The twisted figure at the altar, a monstrous silhouette, leaned closer, shadows crawling over its grotesque form like ants. A gust of wind swept through, blowing out the candles and plunging them into darkness once more. The oppressive shadows thickened as if delighted. "Join us!" the chorus grew louder, almost ecstatic. Sensations rippled along Sarah's skin, like whispers grasping for her soul. "No!" she screamed, voice cracking. She felt a fire ignite inside her, rising against the chill. "I won't give in." Taking a 100% chance, her body surged forward, dragging Mia with her. But thankfulness quickly soured as their escape was met with a wall of darkness, slick and unyielding, slamming against them with supernatural force. Sarah felt her heart racing, echoing like a drum of desperation. In that split second of immobilization, her fear twisted into rage. "Let us go!" Sarah shouted, channeling every ounce of courage into that single phrase, her voice cutting through the cacophony like a sword. The shadows hesitated. Just for a moment, they faltered. A fissure appeared, revealing the swirling darkness beyond. Jake! Sarah's heart ached, and hope mingled with horror. If this was a chance to break free, she had to act. But her son remained trapped at the altar, locked in the tormented gaze of darkness, now more than ever resembling the horror it exuded. Mia, hold on to me. No matter what. She plunged into the crevice, feeling the ice-like grip of shadows clawing at her, clawing at the very essence of her being. The chilling laughter whispered taunts, doubts piercing her resolve like needles. Suddenly, the ground quaked. Rumbles echoed through the chamber as shadows writhed and pulsed, threatening to swallow them whole. Mom! I see him. Mia pointed, fear etched on her adorable face, twisting into a mask of anguish as Jake's figure appeared once more, blurred and distorted, his eyes holding fear that matched their own. Come, Jake! Sarah screamed, fighting against the freezing pull of darkness. We're here. A muffled answer greeted them, a plea lost in the rising shrieks of the shadows. Mom, please! Mia begged, the weight of their peril heavy in her voice. Every second could seal their fate. Time hung, suffocating, terror expanded like darkness pressing in on all sides. Would Jake's figure vanish again, helpless, into the dark? Would they have the courage to break free? The shadows boiled around them, imminent horror pulsating through the air. Could they find Jake in time? Or would they be consumed by eternal darkness, trapped within the cycle of despair forever? As Sarah made that choice, the shadows tightened, almost eager for the feast. A terrifying realization washed over her. What if it was all a trap? What if this was just the beginning of a much worse fate? Mia! Sarah gasped, the weight of the decision pressing down like clay. Mom, what do we do? Run! The shadows lunged, reaching for them, ready to snatch them both into the void. But would escape bring salvation or something darker? The ground trembled beneath them, a deep resonance that echoed through Sarah's bones. She pressed her body against Mia, eyes locked on the shadowed nightmare where Jake was trapped. The darkness thickened, with tendrils reaching for them, greedy and relentless. Mom, hurry! Mia tugged at Sarah's arm, her small voice drowned in the cacophony of despair that rose from the altar. Sarah felt the icy grip of fear swallow her, but deep down, something sparked. A surge of determination. We can't leave him. She shouted, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Then came the laughter. It echoed through the chamber, a mocking chorus that suffocated hope. Join us, the phrase twisted into a chant, winding around them like a noose. Mia, wide-eyed and trembling, spun to face her mother. Do you see him? He needs us. Terror flared in Sarah's stomach, a hot iron pressing into her gut. Time seemed to stretch as every second bled fear and uncertainty. She could feel the edges of her mind fraying, whispers clawing at her sanity. No. We will find him. Bolstered by a fierce maternal instinct, she lunged forward, forcing herself into the darkness, pulling Mia along. Heart thundering against her ribs, Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as shadows lashed out, wrapping around her like serpents. With a primal scream, not today. She ripped at the shadows, pushing toward the altar. Each step felt like wading through thick smoke, a battle against instinct that screamed for her to retreat, to vanish into the darkness. Jake! She cried out, her voice cracking. We're coming. Through the swirling shadows, she glimpsed him, a flicker of Jake's familiar face, a warped reflection filled with terror. Mom! He shouted, reaching out, a vision distorted by despair. But the altar pulsed with dark energy, casting a grotesque glow that distorted their vision. The shadows regrouped, coiling tighter around Sarah and Mia. She fought against the suffocating weight, feeling it slip, threading through her fingers like water. What if it's a trap? Mia cried, her voice strained. Fear flashed across her innocent face as shadows clawed at her tiny legs, pulling her back. Sarah steadied herself. We can't think like that. We push forward. Together. No. A voice slithered through the air, thick with venom. Join us forever. The sinister melody wrapped around them, igniting sparks of dread once more. They moved through the distortion, Mia's hand slipping off her mother's grasp. I can't hold on. She screamed. The shadows pulled like a tidal wave, threatening to devour them whole. Fight, Mia. Fight. Sarah yelled, desperation feeding her voice. You're strong. Remember the park. The laughter. Hold on to it. Mia's eyes blazed for just an instant, and Sarah saw hope glimmer beneath the overwhelming fear. But Jake's figure flickered like a candle about to be snuffed out. Mom! Save me! He cried. With a jolt, the air shifted, dark and thickening, shadows swelling with a mind of their own. Sarah felt water trickling from the corners of her eyes, tears mingling with determination. Keep moving. We're almost there. Sweat dripped down her spine, sending chills through her. As they neared the altar, a crack of ice echoed around them. The altar, surrounded by shadows, began to tremble as if something was awakening. Jake! She screeched, the horror of it all crashing down. The altar glowed brighter, black and white swirling together. It was a portal to hell. With one last push against the darkness, she reached out for Jake, but the shadows rebuffed her, hissing with fury. They clung tighter, a suffocating embrace. Mom! Jake's scream was deafening, and then came the silence, a thick, suffocating, almost taunting silence. Sarah, the shadows whispered her name, their voices entwined, seductive, persuasive. Join us. The finality hung heavy in the air. Would they turn back? Or would they plunge into that abyss together? The shadows shifted, delighted, hungry. Sarah Mia suddenly, a cracked light spilled through a fissure above them, illuminating the darkness with a beam of hope. But would it be enough? With hearts racing, they darted for the light, the shadows lunging after. What would they find on the other side? Freedom or a fate worse than death? The darkness roared, furious at their defiance. Run! Sarah bellowed, but the choice loomed larger than the shadows themselves. Could they escape this nightmare, or was the darkness simply an extension of their own fears? Sarah's heart thundered in her ears, pounding against the raw fear coursing through her veins. She couldn't lose this fight. Not after everything. Not when Jake's and Mia's lives hung in the balance. Breathless, she reached for the glimmering light, a beacon against the oppressive darkness that swirled hungrily around them. Hold on, we're almost there. She shouted, dragging Mia with her. Jake's figure flickered in her mind, a lifeline of resolve. They were running toward freedom, but the shadows shrieked, their voices swelling like a tide, clamoring for them to yield. Join us, they hissed again, their whispers curling in the air like smoke. Self-doubt surged, creeping around her heart, wrapping tight like a vice. How could she fight something that thrived on fear? Mommy! Mia shrieked, yanking on her hand. I can't keep going. With a surge of fierce determination, Sarah steeled her resolve. Yes, you can. Trust me. They pushed harder, pounding toward the light, each step filled with agonizing uncertainty. As they crossed the threshold into the illumination, warmth enveloped them like a protective cloak, a barrier against the icy breath of the shadows. But the battle wasn't over. The darkness surged forward, furious and relentless, snapping at their heels like a rabid beast. No! Sarah shouted, feeling the heat of the light kick back at the shadows, forcing them to retreat. Moments felt like hours as the shadows roared, reaching, twisting through the air like hungry fingers, desperate to reclaim their prize. Jake! She yelled once more, fear tightening across her chest. She could sense his presence nearby, lost but not entirely gone. Something flickered within the shadows, a glint of his blue eyes, wide with terror. Mom! Jake's voice echoed, a haunted note clinging desperately to hope. Sarah's heart ached as she recognized that sound. It yanked at her resolve and reinvigorated her soul. "I'm coming, Jake," she shouted, pulling Mia close. "Stay with me." They forged ahead, the warmth of the light pushing them through the darkened veil that threatened to swallow them whole. "Please. Don't leave me." Jake's voice rang out, cracking through the cacophony of the wailing shadows. "Don't worry, I'm here," Sarah replied, feeling the weight of the shadows clawing at her back. Time felt suspended as she desperately searched for a way to reach him. "Mom, I can't lose you," she roared, her voice ringing clear as she plunged deeper into the embrace of the growing light. She caught a glimpse of Jake, just beyond her reach, struggling against chains of darkness pulling him away. Panic flooded through her. "Stay strong, Jake. I'm here. What if it's a trap?" Mia's voice was shaky, her hands trembling as she clung to Sarah. "No. Don't think like that." With every ounce of maternal instinct flaring up within her, Sarah burst forward, refusing to allow fear to drown her spirit. They had to find Jake. The light felt alive, and Sarah channeled every bit of her energy into it, a blazing beacon against the relentless darkness. With one final push, Sarah surged through the barrier, her heart pounding in harmony with her resolve. The shadows withdrew momentarily, recoiling from the radiant force. She felt Mia tighten her grip, a fierce determination echoing through her tiny body, an unspoken bond holding them together. "Jake!" She screamed one last time, desperation fueling her voice. And then she saw him, a silhouette struggling painfully within the twisted limbs of darkness. Heart racing, she dashed forward that in a single, breathless moment, she reached out her hand. "Grab my hand." Jake's eyes widened. They locked onto each other, panic morphing into desperate hope. Then, with a fierce cry, he lunged forward, seizing her grip. The shadows howled, furious at their defiance. But with a strength born from fear and love, Sarah pulled him through the threshold of the light. The shadows shrieked and twisted, their last grasping tendrils dissipating into mist. "Join us," echoed one last hollow voice before the connection snapped. They stumbled into the light, finally united. Sarah enveloped both Mia and Jake in an embrace, the warmth sweeping over their bodies, calming the frantic chaos in their hearts. "We did it," she breathed, collapsing into a fit of tears, relief washing over her like a cleansing rain. But just as the shadows receded, Sarah glimpsed a final flicker of darkness retreating into the night, an ominous reminder that Maplewood's darkness would always linger. Yet as she held her children tightly, she felt a new resolve budding inside her. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Maplewood would never feel as safe again, but they were home, together. They would navigate through the uncertainties, whatever waited in the shadows beyond. At that moment, Sarah whispered to her children, "Wherever the darkness lurks, we will face it together." As the whispers faded into the night, one thing was clear: they had the power to choose their destiny. And they did. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now. Don't miss the next exclusive stories that will leave you breathless. Smash that like button now to keep the algorithm buzzing. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about tonight's adrenaline-pumping conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this wild end. Step up, true fans. Support the channel and let us keep the stories coming together.